Hello, beautiful humans. I'm Jem Madrone, and tonight I want to talk about self sabotage in the process of awakening and transformation. Because this was a question that came up in the group today, and it's a really good question because it's something that happens with pretty much everyone during this process of awakening and transformation. And that's when we're moving along through the process and we suddenly hear these really loud voices that are trying to talk us out of everything that we think that we should do for ourselves, the things that we've found are really helpful for ourselves, like meditation, yoga, eating well, reading a good book, taking time for ourselves, all of those things that, maybe in the beginning of the process or at some point we felt very empowered to do all of these things. And then all of a sudden, we notice that the voice in our head has gotten really loud and obnoxious, usually, and trying to talk us out of it. And, this is most definitely the voice of the ego. And it shows up in so many different ways because as we move through this process, as we do our healing, as we start to become more connected with ourselves and with our truth, the ego senses that it's losing its power and it freaks out and it fights back. And it fights back using the mind because that's where the ego lives. And so it will start in all sorts of ways to try to sabotage our process so that it can keep its power. And it really thinks that it's keeping us safe because that's what the ego, out of balance ego, was created to do, was to keep us safe because we didn't know any other way at that point in our life. But it's no longer keeping us safe. It's cutting us off from ourself. But it still fights back when we go through this process and we start connecting with ourselves because it does feel like a real death. That's why they call it ego death, because the ego feels like it is dying because a part of us is dying. And so it plays its games. It has a lot of tricks. The ego is a trickster, it's a shapeshifter, it's an opportunist. And so when it senses that it's losing its power because we are progressing through this process of awakening, it will throw whatever it can at us to regain that power. And it might look like simply trying to tell us that, oh, you're good, you've done all of this work, you've come through all of this healing, you don't need to do your meditation today. You don't need to do that practice that you've been doing. Oh, you don't need to do your yoga, or you're good. Why bother? Or it can come in at times when things are really hard and we're really going through a difficult time, and it may say things like, oh, that's not going to help anything anyway, like you need way more than a half hour of yoga, so why bother doing it? And so anytime you hear that voice that is trying to talk you out of things, that is coming from a place of negativity, that is not in your highest good, you can be sure that it's the voice of the ego. And so recognizing that voice is essential. And I kind of see it sometimes. I got this image of the old cartoons where you had the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder, and they're whispering into your ear both at the same time. Although the devil or the ego is usually shouting obnoxiously, and the angel is sitting very peacefully and gracefully, just waiting for you to recognize it and whispering. And that's the heart. That angel is the voice of the heart. And it can be really hard to hear that voice of the heart when the ego is so loud and obnoxious. But that voice is there. And what we have to do is stop paying attention to the voice of the ego so that we can hear the voice of the heart. And so if you're feeling like you're being pushed around by your ego and you've kind of been susceptible to some of the messages that the ego gives you, remembering that it can be very tricky and sometimes it can be difficult to discern between those voices. Think of it as the two voices on your shoulders, and that may help you decide which is which, because it's actually very obvious once you start watching, which voice comes from fear, the voice of the ego, and which voice comes from love, the voice of the heart. And so don't let your ego win. Call bullshit on the ego when it's feeding you these lies and feeding you its attempts to gain its control back, and and become quiet. Do the things that you know that you need to do, and listen to the heart. And so if you're really ready for this change of power, to move the power from the voice of ego into the heart, to allow the ego to be absorbed by the authentic self, then please send me a private message, reach out, and we can talk and see if the work that I do with my clients would be a good fit for you. So I'm sending you guys so much love. Thanks for listening. And I want to say hi to everyone who's here. It looks like Jesse and Jennifer and Carrie and probably a few others that I can't see. So thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, just let me know, and sending you so much love. Have a great night.